Since you're listening to our podcast, perhaps you may want to try learning more with RealTuners in a live dyno environment. We have 2-day courses in dyno shops all across the country. Register for these at RealTuners.com. Click on RealTuners Live Classes. Learn how to tune your own standalone EFI systems like Holley, FuelTech, Megasquirt, Fast, and now GM factory ECUs all live on the chassis dyno. We now are setting dates for GM Gen 3 and 4 2-day classes taught by James Short of Shore Tuning. Our classes are built for bud-conscious racers seeking max performance for minimum spend. Upcoming classes with available seats are as follows. Our GM Factory ECU classes are August 11th and 12th at Endless Performance in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and October 13th and 14th in Dallas-Fort Worth. Both are filling up fast. Sign up now. Stay tuned for more fall and winter dates. Get more info or sign up for updates at RealTuners.com. We do this for a living, and we want you to be able to do it too. Everybody, and welcome to RealTuners Radio, episode 56. Tonight, we got Rick Gorski of Firecore Ignition Wires, the leading producer of some of the best ignition components that you can possibly buy to put on your hot rod. In addition to that, we also have our usual crew of funkies, to include, but not limited to, John Bealey from Little John's Motorsports Solution, Tom Sewell, Fuel Injector Development, James Short from Shore Tuning. We got Mark Dahlquist with Throttles Performance coming out of the frozen tundra of North Dakota. Bill Fowler of Bear Brakes keeping us in check. Scott Evans of Helix Tuning. Cody Bruce and Mo Lonis from Nano Nitrous. Chad Reynolds from Bankshift.com. Movie star Dan Parker. Don't let it go to his head. And this guy, Rye Klemp from Bull City Speed. And finally, tuning this podcast and keeping it on the rails is none other than the notorious Scott Clark, Real Tuners.
Good Lord, Rye Klemp, was that an intro for our podcast or a Tampax commercial, dude? What happened tonight?
What are you talking about?
That was like super mellow. Welcome to the Real Tuners podcast.
I gotta kind of chill it out a little bit when my kids are trying to go to sleep. So like,
that's what it was. Hush, baby.
My wife will text me and be like, "Shh, quiet down there." So like,
you on that podcast again? I can hear it.
Welcome to Real Tuners Radio. Yeah, sorry.
That was pretty mellow, man. I guess I could unmute Rick there too. Cool. Dude, go ahead.
It's been so hot here, man. I'm so tired and drained.
Like nasty hot?
Yeah, dude. It's tough for me to get fired up right now.
It was hot here today too in Iowa. It was like, it had to be like mid 90s, but I'm sure that's not as nasty as it gets for you guys down there in the Southeast. But
yeah, 115 in Vegas.
But it's a dry heat.
I'm just glad it did not rain. We've been getting dumped on, man.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You guys out there are getting just plowed with water this year. It's been a decent year for the farmers up here, but not horribly wet.
Yeah, it's unseasonably wet. Like, it's usually pretty rainy here. You get an occasional thunderstorm, but man, it's been rough.
72 degrees in the shop here, boys.
In Fargo. Yeah, F off.
I think it was like 90 outside. I don't know. I don't go there.
4 months of the year that Mark enjoys. The rest of the time at negative 24 in Fargo, eh?
Yeah.
Check out my cold start video. Seriously cold. We love Mark so much, but Rye's idea was we're going to start a new podcast where we just give Mark highly technical things to do reviews on and get real frustrated with. We love Mark, man.
Here you go. Here's a home stereo with Bluetooth. Let's watch Mark's.
Oh, God golly. Oh, God golly.
I'm past Bluetooth. I'm into, what is it, Pandora? Yeah.
iHeartRadio is up next. It's crazy here in Fargo. Sorry. Oh, hey, I didn't screw up anything yet tonight. We don't have no reason to drink yet. The audio started. Everything's recording tonight. That's going to blow up now. You watch.
Oh, we weren't supposed to drink yet?
Oh, yeah, whoops.
Insert foot.
Yeah, it's all right. Oh, my God. Busy week for me. Getting ready for a class this weekend. If you guys are, anybody listening, that Milwaukee class went from 9 people signed up to like 21 people signed up in like the last 48 hours. And that's funny. That's how these things tend to go. So if there are always a couple no-shows. I got a couple seats left. I got like 2 seats left open for it. But anyway, Milwaukee at Endless Performance at AJ Kunkel's shop this weekend. It's going to be awesome. That place is such a killer place to do a class. But that's about it. If anybody wants to do that, check out RealTuners.com. There's a couple seats left. What else? Rye, so dude, what's been going on? We didn't have you last week. You were babysitting kids or something. What's going on? What's new? What's shaking? Anything new in the world of Rye?
Man. Dude, drag week prep, it's coming up. It's right around the corner, a little over a month away. So put a trailer hitch on the car. I've been doing the list race thing here locally, but haven't made too many changes with my car. I did acquire a new vehicle today, and I'm super excited about it. I'll be putting a video up of that. It's a car that me and a buddy of mine kind of collaborated on. Another Mustang with an LS. I'm sick of them too, but we're gonna have some fun with this one. Stupid, dirty, cheap, like low buck as possible.
I thought that was your other car.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's kidding. It's like lowest buck with Bewley cam.
Tough crowd.
Wait a minute. We've done this already.
Yeah. You guys are hilarious.
No, Rye's been 8s. He's the man now. It's pretty awesome. I just like hearing you lecture people on how to do stuff right. It's actually pretty cool because like all the mistakes you made, you're really good about helping people not make those same mistakes. I like seeing that.
Yeah, I've torn up a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, not a lot as much as most guys that do this full time, but I've cut a lot of corners. If I think I can make it happen, I try it, and then if it doesn't work, like I've listened to everybody on here, like everybody probably listening. I see Scott Sublett, my buddy's listening. I've looked at him dead in the face. I go, I hear what you're saying. I understand, but I'm not gonna fucking do it and do it my own way. And when it bites me in the ass, you can tell me I told you so. But
yeah,
you know. Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of hard headed with some of that stuff. But in other news, speaking of drag week, I did call into the other podcast.
How did that go? I tried to listen so bad. I was in the middle. What was I doing? I was over at Andy Leach's shop.
It went good. There's a mutual respect there. Those guys were super cool. You know, I didn't call in there to bust their balls, but I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. You know, there's been rumors that their car's not going to be ready
for a second year in a row. That sucks for Mike.
Yeah, and I was like, look, man. I called in. They're like, who are you? And I was like,
they know who you are. I'm gonna pull that shit.
I was like, I'm Rye from the other podcast. So it was like, look, man. We're going to be in the same class. We're going to be at the same place. Like, let's throw down the gauntlet. Let's have a bet. And he goes, well, you already won because we're not going to be there. And then we kind of just from there.
That's just depressing from there. So Mike's super cool. I like Mike.
Yeah. We bullshit a little bit for about 15, 20 minutes or so. And I was like, you know, like, hey, I hope to see you guys out there. And we
need to cross podcast together live sometime. Link each other into each other's podcast live. That would be hilarious.
Oh yeah, it'd be a good time.
Yeah, but
I said, you know, let me know when the car's done and you're right up in New York, and maybe we can go to like Atco or something like that and have a grudge race or something.
I'll come to you and push your stuff in.
Yeah, I got some buddies up in Jersey. Like we can make something.
Actually,
happen.
He's got some dudes working on that car. That should be a mid 8-second car when it's done, right? Is my understanding the way he's going for it?
Yeah, there's and you know, a lot of our listeners are on both podcasts. They're fans of both. They listen to both. I started out listening to automotive podcasts.
All 31 of their listeners listen to us.
So
with 109 other friends. No, I'm just kidding. Teasing. I'm teasing. I love those guys. I don't keep track of that shit.
No, they were cool, man.
I don't care about the fact that we have 110,000 unique listeners. You know, none of that stuff matters to me.
They're super, super respectful. There's a mutual respect there, and you know, hopefully one day we can do something. But they're going to come down to drag week. I encourage them to try and make it to ZMAX.
Oh, they're fun as hell to hang out with. I went to their. I actually went to Mike's house and did the studio when I did one of my shows with them. dude's got a bitch in studio and one in a spare room in his house. Almost, I don't want to say no expense spared because that's not really true, but it's really nice, good quality stuff in his sound, and he's meticulous about that stuff. I'm kind of fly by night, but yeah, I enjoyed the crap out of hanging out with those guys, but it sucks to see that situation. Their car's second year in a row is in chassis jail.
Yeah,
I believe it's chassis jail. Someone correct me on that if I'm wrong.
No, a lot of it was like what Mike was saying last night was he goes, just like a lot of us, that automotive stuff is just, it's a hobby. It's a side gig. His passion is money and making the most of it that he can. I told him, I was like, hey man, like
he's got all kinds of cool investments and stuff. It's pretty
not going to knock your hustle. Like work hard now and play later. Like do your thing. Totally understand that, this isn't a priority and life happens.
Ryan was epic on the Weed and Feed podcast. You guys are horrible. I like that.
It was cool though. They were super nice. I wasn't trying to call over there and like ruffle feathers or step on toes. I just
actually, and they're great shit talkers too. But it's really hard to be mean to anybody over there because they're just generally super laid back and cool.
Yeah, it was a good time. I look forward to meeting those guys, and then maybe we can line it up and get something done. And he's building a little turbo daily driver, and I'm building a turbo daily driver, so we can race everything we got in the jam driveway.
Let's go twiddle turbos together.
I will touch tips and establish dominance.
Okay, shit just got weird.
Yeah, that was a little out there.
You just had to go there.
Can I say something about my experiences over this last week?
Yeah. Maybe.
So I went out of town. I packed up all of my stuff and I installed a Holley Dominator system in a NHRA legal stock eliminator.
You did that whole install off-site too, didn't you?
Yeah,
that tools and everything. You just took it with you and just did it on site.
Yep. And got it up and running, and we did a parking lot tune in it. Went to the racetrack, and it worked out fairly well. But on the internet, you're always seeing people asking, "What part should I run? What part should I run for my car?" And whoever your friends are that can support you and help you, that's the part you run. When we were working on this Gen 3 Hemi, I had a question about the harness. I called Brad Nagel. I said, Brad, have you run into this? He goes, yeah. And oh, by the way, don't forget this. Saved my butt because I didn't have the right connector. And
crank and cam sensors are on the Holley harness don't match all the crank and cams necessarily on all the families of Hemis, right? The connector. Yep. And there's not much they can do about that. I ran into that too. Yep.
Well, and the engine had the late style coils, but it had the early style connectors. And of course, I had ordered the stuff from 200 miles away and went off of what I thought it was and had the wrong thing, but I was able to order the harness. And then Brad said, hey, don't forget that there's capacitors for the coils too that go on the back of the cylinder heads. Right. Didn't have those.
Right.
Went down to the Chrysler store, ordered them for the next day. Had all the parts on Friday. It was Thursday, had all the parts on Friday. Those two things right there saved my entire install.
Yeah.
Then I'm having problems setting it up with some of the custom math. I call Scott Evans or texted Scott Evans. Scott, what do I do here? I forget what it was, but it got me on the right track.
Thank you for not calling me.
I did call you.
What did you call me about? What did you ask me about?
I don't know.
I was thrashing on Andy. I was getting ready for Bonneville with Andy Leach and those guys. Hydroponics. Hey, you know what? Laugh it up, brother. I'm eating lettuce like nobody's business. The devil's lettuce is good stuff. All right.
Hey, when you come up here next time, you bring your own tomatoes. I'll have Lisa make you pizza sauce.
Amen. I don't know how my tomatoes are going to turn out. They're just starting to make little baby green tomatoes right now after like 2 months in the thing, but they're cooking.
The whole point of that is that without the support group that I've got, that would have been a miserable failure just from a couple of little oversights. But because I have the friends that I have, it all worked out. And that's what's important when you're doing this stuff is work with somebody that can help you.
Man, I gotta queue up sappy Friends music or something now. Sorry, carry on. I'm never prepared.
No, I'm just. It's all every day. I see what part should I run. What part should I run? Doesn't really matter if you have run whatever who's helping you is comfortable with.
And what's going to work?
$5 by buying it on Amazon Prime instead of buying it from my local dealer.
No better way than to not have your guy answer the phone on a Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. See if Amazon Prime can help you with your EFI install.
Yeah. Doug, Brad was telling me that
I would like to point out that we are the only certified Holley dealer in all of North Dakota, but still the help group that I have wasn't I couldn't call Holley Engineering Thursday night. I mean, that that was Brad and Scott, and
Yeah,
whoever
Thursday,
else.
7:37 in the evening. Can I run a 2-wire IAC with a Holly? Yes. Here's what you need to do to make it work. Blah blah blah.
Wow.
Then it was, can you scale a tack for the Holly because the tack was reading wrong or something, and it turns out that it's looking for a 4-cylinder signal on the car, and
Yeah.
you have to do some stuff in like an output table with a PWM signal that you have to do a divider and tell it to do it.
But we
There
got
was-
it. Yeah, we got it. So,
Lovely.
and that's the sort of thing that's important.
Okay,
there you
so
go.
we need to move on to our guest tonight because I don't want to keep this guy waiting because he's super cool. God, I and I was like, stop talking because we got to talk about all this cool stuff on the podcast that this guy's done. But and I don't know, my introduction to our guest, Mr. Rick Gorski from Firecore, was working with Ray Barton Racing, and for our turbo motor, Ray suggested his wires. He made some wires for a 2nd gen Hemi that we run at Bonneville that my former customer is running now. Don't get me started on that one. My former customer with that dude running around acting like he tuned that car that I tuned. But lovely. Anyway, so he that was the first time I ran into his product, and then I realized, and Barton was like, "Oh, dude, look at all the cars that run these wires. You just have this guy make your custom length wires, tell him what you need, and there's never a problem. And these things will last like 10 years until they throw, something, whatever." So that was my first introduction to Firecore wires, and it was interesting. I will tell you, as a tuner, I'm probably the biggest of the electronics and noise nerds on the podcast here. I'm huge into coupled noise and using an oscilloscope to track down the source and where the stuff's coming from. And I will tell you, spark plug wires are one of the most important things that you have to be careful with on a digitally controlled or monitored vehicle. Bottom line, people don't realize, but plugs and wires are a huge deal. And so anyway, without further ado, making squeaky noises for us, Mr. Rick Gorski, welcome aboard, bud.
Hey guys, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're good. So
That's my chair.
that's fine. Squeak away,
it's
man.
emitting RF from the springs underneath it.
I was hoping it was a dog or a bird.
Right? I'm
I
killing a
actually
dog
drove
over
into
here.
the office. I've got 4 kids under 12. They're all getting ready for bed. So I drove into the office. I'm in my little honeycomb here.
Outstanding. Yeah. So
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks
Wow,
for
I'm
coming
really-
on. And
I'm
it's
really,
real laid back. Just have a drink, chill out with us, and talk a little bit. But I guess, my 2 main themes where I want to go with this, and Rye's a better interviewer, but I'll turn it over to Rye here in a minute. But my 2 main themes are, number one, at some point I want you to brag a little bit about some of the cars that your stuff is on. We're talking about championship winning boats, dragsters. Oh my God, Engine Masters Challenge stuff that's run your wires. The pictures on your Facebook. In fact, I'm going to switch it up here right now and put on the Rick Gorski slideshow. I went and stole a bunch of your slides off of Facebook because all these killer motors you're on. And it's neat because there's a lot of little guy stuff in there too, I noticed.
That's the biggest thing. Any one of our customers could be a bragging right. Each one of them, whether it's a 300 horse, whatever, Mopar that's cleaned up, that guy, believe me, is just as happy as Antron Brown.
Yeah.
When it works right,
Yeah, not having misfire when you hear something making clean pulls down the track, you're like, oh, I finally got it.
It is.
That's super cool.
It's an accomplishment,
Yeah.
So how often, and more likely than not, you're going to be able to put something on your car that somebody recommended that actually works. It was like blown away.
That's hard to find nowadays somewhat too. The manufacturing processes and the quality control, we're kind of in a rough era this last 15 or 20 years. And so sometimes it's tough to find good stuff. Okay, give us a little background. You told me a little bit about the story. I got the 5-minute version. Take all the time you need. We got all the time we want tonight. If it goes 3 hours, fine. But I just start off with the background. How the heck did you get started? I was blown away at the grassroots nature of your upbringing. So tell us about it.
I had a 71 GTX I had for 32 years. And I got married and I was going to start having kids, but I always wanted to put a Hemi in the car, a 2nd gen Hemi. So I didn't like the wires that were on the other manufacturers. And I asked a buddy, and he said, "Hey, you know what? About a mile down the road, there's an ignition wire factory. Go down there. I'll introduce you to the guy." And that was Mike Clanton. He introduced me to my partner now. And yeah, he's like, "Hey, we got a wire." It was pretty noisy, you know, that people were using it. And they stopped using it as soon as data acquisition came around.
Right. So this all started becoming a real issue when digital electronics started showing up on cars, and I'm guessing that's the race pack era and the data logging era. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys think? I was like, I came around.
Mid-80s?
We started designing this like 13 years ago,
Okay.
and then the wire that they were using ended 5 years before that. So when did, I mean, it all started with what? EGTs was the first data.
I think so because I think the early race pack stuff was just like ticker tape stuff or something. So yeah, it actually would have been. This would have been more like in the 90s, late 90s.
First, yeah. Well, the first time I really noticed it was something special, we were at a race in Columbus with Mel Roth's Willys, the 41 Willys.
Right.
And they came in, and it was Mark Mickey introduced me, took me down there. Mark and Ryan and the crew took me down there, and I made wires for them that instant. So then they said, "Well, we'll give it a try, eh?" So the next morning they came down and they dragged me down to their pit, and they said, "Look at this computer." And I said, "Well, I'm a Mopar guy. We don't have this kind of stuff. You know, we have still iron heads and Hemi grind 3/4 cams." So they said these graphs, so you can read them perfectly. I said, "Well, you know, tell me a little bit more about that." They said these graphs have never looked like this because the EGTs and the data acquisition just is too fuzzy. And this, we can read these perfectly clear. And Mark Mickey said, "This, I told you guys, this is the guy I've been telling you about." So then I went from pit to pit and started meeting the who's who of the ADRL Pro mods. And I was so blown away. And I had my little press. I slept underneath Mark Mickey's Camaro, his Pro Street orange Camaro in their toter home. And it started right there. And, let me take it back. It did not start there. That's when it really took off with
the big power
the
guys.
level underneath Top Fuel.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it started at Norwalk with Matt Smith Racing. I walked up to Matt Smith. I didn't even have a shirt, a Firecore shirt. I went up to him. I said, "Hello, sir. My name is Rick Gorski. I make a ignition wire. I think you're going to be pretty impressed." He goes, "You know what? Perfect timing. I hate my wires." So I made him. I cut up another set to make him a set. And he says, "We're going to take this back and we're going to dyno it." He called me back. He said, "I want 3 sets." So they started racing that, and that was 2006 or 7. And he ended up winning that year. So then I asked him, I said, "Hey, when you guys pull," that's right when he got in with Don Schumacher Racing. They all pulled their trucks in the same building. I said, "What would it take for me to meet one of the Top Fuel guys?" He said, "I'll give you Phil Schuler's name." So I called Phil Schuler, and he said, "Absolutely." And then he said, "Oh, Brian Karate kind of lives by you. I said, "Yeah, I knew Karate through, what the heck was his name? He used to be on Popular Hot Riding with Dean Scusa. With Dean. Remember Dean and the Top Fuel guys? He ran for Mopar for a while. He introduced me to a bunch of these guys, and he said, "All right, well, you got the name Peter. You're dropping the right names. Make us a set, and we'll check it out." So they said, "Hey, we like what we see. They invited me to their mag room at Schumacher Racing. They said, "Bring whatever you want to do. We're going to do a bunch of tests." The mag room.
I was in my injector building last night.
Well, it was certainly impressive, and I was kind of blown away. I mean, these guys were walking around, and you see them on TV, and here I am, and they're asking me questions, and I'm like, "Geez, oh man!" So they put it on the mag, and they have 10 cylinders with spark plugs, which is hooked up to a bottle of nitrogen, I believe it is, and it's
a pressure chamber.
Pressure.
I've used the pressure chamber. Yep.
Well, they did that, and we used different spark plug wires that I brought samples of, and they had samples of. And he goes, "Interesting." And he didn't tell me what he was seeing first. He saw the RPM and where the sparks and the pressure where the spark stopped sparking. He said, okay, how about we're going to do this now? So they have these 2 electrodes, and they would spread them, see how far the RPM started and how wide it was and where it ended as well. And he goes, this is really interesting. So I said, well, tell me what you're doing. It's Todd Okahara and Phil were doing this. And they said, this is a really neat wire. Where'd you come up with this? And I said, well, I was working on my Hemi, and I got with an engineer that makes it for my friend. And he said, who do you want a copy of? I said, nobody. What do you mean you don't want to copy off anybody? Everybody copy. And I said, no. So we're going to do this. I was an electrician in the Navy for a little bit, and I don't pretend to know what you guys know, but I know enough to get me in trouble. And that EMI and RF is a pretty big deal nowadays. And a lot of guys are complaining about not being able to use their EGTs because they just can't read it. It's too noisy. So he said, interesting. So he came back in about 3 weeks and said, I think I got something. And Scott Kofel over, and they run they used to help with Jeffrey and the Pro Stacks. He used to be with the Chrysler program. Said, Rick, we need a wire for our mag. They have a Lake Erie Monster. It's a top dragster. So we gave this wire, and they said, Eric, I trust you. I said, Scott, you can trust me. And they ran it, and they loved it. They ended up putting, he said they ran over 600 hits on this thing, and it's never done like that with a Mag 44. They said it doesn't last that long. I said, well, that's good, right? And he said, Rick, it's unbelievable. This is really. So then I went to the Norwalk, and I met Matt Smith. I said, Matt, here's the wire. And he said, great. And he went back and he ordered 3 sets, and then Todd Okahara, and then we went to the mag room, and Ace McCullough was watching, and he put his arm around me. He said, kid, where have you been? I'm like, oh my gosh. Ace McCullough put his arm around me. He knows who I am. So then, went to racer to racer to racer, and pretty soon at that time they had 6 Top Fuel cars, and they ordered 15,000 foot of wire. So I was making each of their sets, and it took 2 hours to make it because some of them used different types of epoxy for their terminals and this and that. And I said, I can't do this anymore, guys. It's taking way too much time. I can't. So we ended up, I made a kit, a 70-foot kit of wire for the twin spark plug Hemis, and then a 60-foot kit for the coil kit. They're changing the coil wires. So then they get another racer. So they ordered 15,000 for 2 years. The next year they got another racer. So they got 7 teams, and they ordered 7,500, which is only 1 spool of wire. And that lasted all year. So they're getting more passes. So I asked Brian Karate, I said, Brian, what's going on? He goes, Rick, we are documenting less drop cylinders, and we're getting 30% more hits out of your wires than we were. So Mike Lewis, the senior vice president, said, Rick, as long as you're making wires, our crew chiefs love this wire. And it kind of went from there. So that was our goal, to be on Top Fuel and then work our way through the sportsman ranks, and it's kind of unfortunate. The guys that are doing this for money, that are in the point series and the sportsman series with the stickers and the contingencies, I really regret not being able to pay those guys, because that's really the guys who index their plugs and really truly search out every quarter horsepower are the guys that really appreciate this wire.
Right. Those guys will spend $20,000 in a winter to pick up 4 horsepower from a different angles on the valve seats. Yeah,
you're not kidding. How much money is spent to find that? It's a set of wires is $125 or $145. Usually, I tell guys, I said, you're it's stuttering, or depending on the racer or the owner, whether he's a weekend warrior or not. Once his fuel situation is all sorted out, and then he gets to his tuning, then, you just can't say, the thing runs like crap, and put wires on, and it's going to magically, it's an improvement, like putting aluminum wheels on a car. It's less rotating weight you're going to pick up, like putting a better intake or better heads, or, it's not magic. There's not a magic potion that makes you have more horsepower. You know, it's impossible to have a complete combustion in a cylinder. It's impossible. You'll never have
There's
it.
always
You'll
some
have blow-
marginal combustion out in the corner somewhere in the crevice
Exactly.
volume.
You've got blow by or whatever. It takes 50,000 volts to jump 1 inch. So manufacturers are having their coils put out 30,000 volts to overcome what? You're running a 35 thou gap.
Right.
Well, you're overcoming blow by, you're overcoming oil, carbon, soot, buildup. You know, you're overcoming all that stuff. But in a perfect situation, if you can have an atomic bomb in there, you're not going to gain any more horsepower. You're burning the same amount of fuel, the same amount of air.
Right.
But if you can add more fuel and more air to that situation and be able to burn it without
still light it
blowing up a
off.
spark.
Yeah, because as the cylinder pressure goes up, the more difficult it becomes to arc that gap.
You
Right?
nailed it.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So when you're adding more fuel, we put these things on a Pro Stock engine. He called me up and me and said, Rick, we lost horsepower. I said, where'd your air fuels go? Oh, they put more fuel. He called me back. He said, Rick, this is unbelievable. I'll never run anything else. So on a Pro Stock car, and you figure these Pro Stock guys got everything nailed down to a T, and he just was blown away. I mean, it's the Nitro Fish Pro Stock. It's amazing stuff. And you know, the recipe for wires really hasn't changed in the last 12 years. So that was 20 years. You know, they're trying to do the same amount, and they're like everybody. They're trying to do the same amount of job with spending a less amount of money. And, you know, you kind of don't blame them because certain companies are paying a ton in contingency and they got to cut corners, you know, whatever. It's the end of the game, you know.
But you
cut your
chose to kind of
costs.
keep it small, and the stuff's still hand assembled, right? I mean,
It
if I
is.
order
And so
set-
we have a press. We've got presses where we
so you
we
can
hand
punch
press
them out.
We hand cut everything.
Got it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, my main factory, yeah, we could do 40 sets in 20 minutes. So it's pretty good. We do all the Malibu race boat, all the Malibu boats.
Right.
all the
An
ranges,
OEM
they have
application, right? Yeah.
They're 6.2s, LSs. So we do all that stuff.
It's interesting that they
big
found that the
machines.
OEM wires were not sufficient for the application.
That's interesting.
Yep.
You know, they did the dynoing up at Roush. I spent some time at Roush.
Right.
And I was not allowed to bring my camera, which I was kind of.
I'm not
they got
surprised.
The signs, they
Yeah.
had the signs everywhere saying, you know, that was right after their twin turbo 4-cylinder won the 24-hour at Le Mans. So
Right.
they were still coming off of that. So they were, you know, the companies are happy. You know, our biggest mantra is you're gonna call me and I'm gonna say, hey, it's a Chevy. Do you have a front drive distributor? Is it a Jessel? What kind of heads you run? You running Brodex heads? Are you running Big Chief heads? You have.
Are you to the
Lemons
point
or
where you can
Cook's
cut
headers?
the lengths and know what boots to put on them just by him telling you the parts combo?
Yes and no. The guys building the headers really are aggravating guys sometimes. You know, like they don't think about the guys making the wires. So it becomes especially putting LSs in so many different kind of cars. You know, there's guys putting them into little Blazers that for I mean, there's no room in these things. So
In other words, he just made a set of wires for Vinny Barbone. Sorry.
in a little Suzuki.
Right, exactly. You know Vinny. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But,
Can we talk
you know,
about
there's some
that
other,
real
there's
quick?
the Blazers. There's
The-
a couple Blazer guys out there that hang out, and they're
Yeah.
and they got
S10
the,
guys.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, a guy showed up
Exactly.
to my class with an S10 that had Firecore wires on it here a couple weeks ago. It was pretty cool. I'm like, cool,
Can,
we're gonna
can
have
we
that guy.
talk about that real quick? Like with your wire, any plug wire, how close is too close? Because I am ultra paranoid on my car, and I'm like, man, 2 inches is too close, and I get super scared of I'm gonna burn something up. And then I look at some of these other cars that people put together, and everything is just packed in there with a shoehorn. You got to remove 5 things to get to 1. And what is the ideal distance? Like, what kind of temperatures can
That's
your wires sustain?
such a gray area. Holy smokes! You know, you
I
have
know, it's like asking
yes.
how much horsepower can this motor handle,
It
but
can't be
Yeah,
distance. It's got to be based on temperature.
Right.
it's a whole bunch of things because you have a whole bunch of different kind of heat. You have conducted heat, convected heat. You have an ambient temperature. Are you running 1/8 mile only or quarter mile? Are you doing a drag week thing? Are you doing
Bonneville
40
was gonna get
miles?
super hot. Yeah, you road racing. Yeah.
If you're doing super street, so we've got these Vipers that are totally brutal on, and you see 6 Corvettes out in California. That's all they do is this road racing stuff. And so we had to throw away these wires every race, or number 7 would always give us problems. So, you know, each one is unique, you know. Depends how much air is in there. If you have fender wells in there, I mean, I've got at the yellow. Am I allowed to say like Yellow Bolt Nats?
Oh, we got to cut him off. All right. So it's been a good night. No, I'm just kidding. You can say whatever you want. We're all drag racers here.
On some of these cars, the guys just said, same question, you know, how close? Well, I have this boot. It's called a Pro Mod boot. We're the only ones that have this boot, and it's very, very unique. It's extremely high temp silicone, and it's like a pink or a salmon color, and that can get right next to that downpipe, and you could put a credit card between there, and it's so impressive, and nothing happens to that boot. Now you got other things on G-forces shutting down or pulling the chutes or taking off, where sometimes if that boot is too tall, it's going to lean forward and back, and you know, I got all kind of stuff. The wind from the fan. We had one guy that kept burning wires. He had no idea. It was only on 1 and 2. Well, his fan was blowing so much air on higher RPM, it was pushing his wires against the primaries. He had no clue. Sitting there in the pits.
Yeah, it looks fine sitting there. Why is it getting hot?
Yeah. So there's all kinds of variable, you know. Depends on what kind of boot. Usually your stuff is color coded. If the boot is black, generally it doesn't really have a high heat
right. Yeah, I
rating.
know it's a very.
They go up different colors. Gray is usually the next one, and then, you know, if you do pretty colors like yellow.
Is this in your product line? Or across? Is this in your product line? You mean with the colors, or do other vendors do this?
No,
as well?
I think generally with all the manufacturers out there, there's only several companies out there that actually make the boots. So we're all kind of sharing. But there's, you know, other companies have their name on it and whatever they can spend the money on. But I just like to get things, you know, things that work. And you know, I won't sell a set of wires that I have a part number on unless the owner and I put that set on exactly like it was. So the guy called, like today, I'm absolutely going crazy. There's a Fulton motor with a rear distributor, and usually all the Fulton motor we put on front distributors or front
I was going to say front drives, yeah.
So I'm absolutely going crazy. I'm calling this guy, please tell me how they are, how they fit. So down at Scotty's, I wait for a phone call from Scotty's, and he races, which is great. You know, they're the engine builders that actually race, and tuners, and that's the greatest thing when guys just don't work out of a garage or work out of a basement and flip parts. You know, the guys are actually out the tracks. I can't tell you how many times guys have called me, and I'm at a race, and they're like, "Really, you race?" Like, well, yeah. I mean, it's like you guys. You know, it's kind of cool. We can relate.
While we're on the
we lash the valves on our way to the track.
Somebody in our chat just asked about the heat topic thing. While we're at it, do you make any boots that take extreme temperatures where, like, if it has to rest against the headers, say, do you do ceramic boots? Do you do anything that's an ultra high temperature boot besides the Pro Mod boot?
No. The thing is about the ceramics, it's a great idea, man. It's a phenomenal idea, but nobody makes it in 8.5 wire. And the thing is, like, a certain manufacturer makes a 10.4 millimeter wire. Well, nobody makes a terminal that fits that. So you have to cut the wire down
right
to terminate it. So the same thing with those ceramics. If somebody made a but then the ceramic is so thick, it won't fit 2-inch primaries or 2 1/4 primaries or whatever. So there again, you're battling. It has to go on the spark plug, but it has to be a ceramic, so it's thick. So there is a good balance between a heat rating of a silicone being able to fit between those primaries, you know, and plus being able to withstand the heat. So it's a balancing act for sure.
We've got a person in the chat that's wondering about running non-resistor plugs with electronics, and do the wires help with interference if you're running non-resistor plugs?
You know, that's and that's been coming up more and more. All I can say is I don't know.
Yeah.
Because
listen, guys, did you hear that answer he just gave? I just pause a second. Do you hear how awesome that is? Someone without an ego issue has just simply said, I haven't figured it, I haven't tested it, or I don't know yet. It's just funny because sometimes it's really hard for us tuners to say, I don't know.
yeah, exactly. You're supposed to know all, know all.
You can't.
Well, do any of you guys have a spectrum analyzer?
I do.
Now,
Yep.
you're able to go through like a water pump or a electric fan and see exactly what frequency range that is set at, correct?
It depends on what kind of signature it's leaving. The system I used for analyzing knock, what frequency a knock system was coming through. So that's the excuse we had for buying a spectrum analyzer. I've never done it through the power or voltage or the power supply of a motor to see the frequency of the noise it makes. But you can measure that with an oscilloscope on the power current on the power side. You could probably track into the frequency there. I've done that before.
Do you think that it would be a great idea to somehow figure that out? Say you have a racer that's got long wires and he's got a front drive. No, say this. He's a rear distributor, big block Chevy guy, and his rate pack is on the firewall on the passenger side.
Right.
And his coil is mounted right there. He's got an electric fan. He's got an electric water pump. Say he's old school.
Yep.
Now he's got EGTs on each tube. And he's coming up with issues. If you put that water pump on and your electric fan and you're running, would you be able to take an oscilloscope or the spectrum analyzer to figure out, okay, between 1800 RPM and 2200 RPM, that frequency range is this?
Yep. So we run into this problem where let's say you had solid core wires and non-resistor plugs on a motor that was now EFI. Almost for sure, you could see that signature in the crank and camshaft trigger patterns, especially if they were inductive type sensors. So I have tracked that down where you could see the actual. I didn't actually count the frequency, but you could see the pulses getting closer together with the higher RPMs. I didn't actually say, that's happening at 21 kilohertz, but I could have, I guess. But I use the scope. I use a regular scope just to visualize that. Mark, we've done this a million times. Remember?
Well, we ran into that in South Dakota on the dyno.
Yes. Or remember that timing cover that was the sensor was shimmed wrong and had a weak waveform, and then
Yep.
Larry Larson.
South Dakota one. Well, the South Dakota one would misfire.
Yeah.
Once we and it was just a resistor plug issue.
So I have a quick story about that. Larry Larson, 2014 drag week. We literally started the truck up, and I was there. I was taking care of the fuel and the spark and this. Well, I was taking care of the electronics basically because they were, getting stuff going the rest of the truck. But we started the thing up, and it had a little bit of a misfire to it when we'd rev it and at idle. And so I put the scope on the crank trigger, which at that point was a 4-tooth MSD flying magnet. And no, I take it back. We swapped to the 4 magnet. God, it was a 36-1 wheel, I think is what it was, a Holly kit. And so you could see the ignition events on the trigger wheel. I mean, on the pattern coming off the crank sensor, like really clear. It would make like a 3 or 4 volt spike, and it was enough to false trigger the ECU into thinking that was a tooth going by, and it would get out of sync just for a second until it would resync. And it was funny because your first thought is like, fuel tech or some blame anything else, but we look on the scope and I'm like, no man, you're feeding it garbage in. And I was telling Rick, this is embarrassing, but if you are a drag week aficionado, you look back on some pictures, I'm sure there's lots of pictures out there still. Look at Larry Larson's truck down the right side, the pan rail there along the block. We had stupidly 2 different guys wired on the ignition when we were doing this, and we ended up with the crank trigger wires running right along the coil wires in the first revision. And I wrapped aluminum foil around about a 3-foot section of that, and then zip tied it to some 10-gauge wire, about a foot of 10-gauge wire that we took the insulation off, ran the rest of that wire to the block, and it made that noise signature go away. And I know Larry was super not happy because it was really ugly looking and shiny and it stuck out and you could see it. But it was so funny because we would take that thing off and it would buck and make noise and not be right and misfire a little bit. But anyway, that was my deal there. And I use an oscilloscope just to observe trigger signals and see if I can identify that noise and get rid of it. That's as far as I've gone.
Do you know why they stopped using solid core wires? You ever hear the
Interference
story?
with radio stuff, aircraft stuff. I'm not
it
sure.
started, like on the old cars, they all had solid core wires, you
Yeah.
know, 50s, 60s. Well, they started using in Nevada or wherever it was, they were building, going through mountains, they had a dynamite. Well, they finally invented remote controlled dynamite detonators.
Right.
And they would wait for traffic to go by, and cars would get up to a certain RPM and hit that frequency and start blowing crap up.
I actually think I've heard that story before. That's not cool, but yeah, holy crap.
So
I know.
my question is if you're at the drag strip and you got the lousiest set of solid core wires you could
See
find,
where Mark's going
with the
with this,
lousiest,
deviant.
with the lousiest set of non-resistor plugs and some points ignition, how much fun could you have with the guy in the lane next to you?
I don't know.
Absolutely, you would blow them away.
Yeah.
And and that range, depending on what RPM, and you guys attest to this, I would love to see what range it is, but it will be it would be a huge amplifier.
Yeah. No, and he talks about the frequency. I do know a guy, Papa John Huber, rest in peace, man, my hero. He actually did this once. The Bosch Automotive Handbook talks about coupled noise and crank trigger signals, and he actually had a noise problem, and to make sure he had the problem under control, he lengthened the power wire. A power wire for the coils and the ECU shared, I think, was our issue. And it literally he could control the RPM at which the engine would start to misfire. Like adding 3 feet of wire made the misfire go above the RPM limit for the motor.
Jeez.
It's the same.
I do.
That same kind of noise that you're talking about. It's the same reason, like in aviation, when we use CADs and stuff like that, like CADs being like explosive devices to jettison auxiliary fuel tanks and everything in between. When they're working on that stuff, like the maintainers on the ground crew, we use radios on the flight line all the time. You can't go up next to the aircraft with CADs installed and a radio in your pocket because what you're talking about, that noise has been known from time to time to set those things off.
Holy balls.
That'd be bad.
I work in an industry
too. I was on the Independence a long time ago. I was a welder.
I work in an industry that we deal with a lot of wireless and RF items that are microphones and things like that. But I purchased years and years ago a high dollar, high power RF analyzer, and I can use it sometimes to see noise on cars being emitted. I can see all that stuff and what it does, and watch the different frequencies that are emitted into the airwaves from it, because it is a big antenna at that point. And I showed somebody once, they were having some kind of problem with wires or coils or something, and I was like, watch, here's why your stuff's screwing up. And I just showed them real-time analyzation of the airwaves, and as soon as they got to that one spot, all of a sudden the whole scope went nuts.
Goes
and it was
nuts,
like, holy crap.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I can't believe that. I was like, yeah, that's the thing.
Well, yeah, so here we are. That's it. I mean, it's pretty impressive that we're started in a garage.
Yeah.
Like most businesses do. That's how Jeg started as well.
I think every good idea started in a basement or a garage. I'm just waiting for mine to get out of the basement.
We find a niche. We all found niches. That's pretty neat.
Clark's Devil's Lettuce for sale.
Yeah, right.
I think what's really interesting to me is that you started like on the top level, like the upper
It sure
echelon
seems
of
like
this,
it to
and
me,
then
man. I mean, he's like
trickled
dropping
down to the sportsman level.
Antron Brown references and stuff like that.
Yeah, let's start out with top fuel and then just work our way down.
Yeah, please.
Let's set a realistic goal here, guys. We're gonna go top fuel, and then we'll get the pro stock guys.
Yeah, let's throw out the New York Yankees and drag racing's names all in the first 2 minutes of the podcast.
Yeah, I want my first order to be 17,000 feet of wire. So, what is that you're going for?
We actually put their name on it now. It's we have Don Schumacher Racing by Firecore on the wire. It's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
That's a pretty big claim.
A lot of these guys are doing. The biggest thing is you guys see it. You're putting even small block Fords, LSs. They're putting coil pack conversions on these things.
Oh yeah.
And
we actually
that's
hate
the biggest thing. Nobody does wires for them.
Yeah.
Nobody makes wires for them. They will, but it costs you $300. Get them in 3 weeks. Nobody needs anything in 3 weeks. Everybody needs it
Or
now.
you got to buy a kit.
So
You got to buy the ends and make them yourself, and nobody likes to do that either.
Well, I like to make all my own wires, but I don't think you can order Firecores as an unassembled kit, can you?
Yes, you can, and it depends because I have a very close friend who was had a Fox Body Mustang, and he was pretty quick, and he was down in Florida at a big race, and I sent down a photographer to do a photo shoot on him, and he called me. He goes, "Dude, your buddy's not running." I said, "Well, I sent the wires. He said he was going to finish him up." Well, I got him back. He goes, "Dude, I never made wires before." I'm like, "Dick, what are you doing?" You know, you have. It's not just having a good wire. It's not just having a good terminal. It's not just having a good boot. They all have to meet together perfectly. You know, I got a good from Mark McCrae. He's up in Canada. He does injection seating. He introduced me to Jeff Deal on the fuel car. You know, so I went over there and he introduced me to Mr. Coletta, and I asked him, "Sir, you know, can I ask who makes your wire sets?" And he goes, "Oh, just, you know, some kid makes them, I guess." And I said, "Sir, you know," I forget who he told me. There probably somebody's listening. I'm gonna get called on it, but he said somebody makes them. I said, "Sir, that should be your number one guy." He said, "It's great care is taken in these wires. It's extremely important. As you guys know, there's no gray area in a magneto. It's got to be exactly right. There's zero room for error on a magneto, or real expensive stuff happens. It goes bad." So we went through a crimping process, and if you crimp them in your hand and you study it and you look with the pliers, if you strip the wire off, exposing the core, and then you want to crimp, if you crimp the insulet first, it actually pulls the core, the conductive core inside the insulet. All right. So imagine crimping the core first. Are you guys familiar with dual crimp core terminals? They're like the I don't want to say the names, but the stainless steel terminals. You crimp it on the core and on the insulet. It's a dual crimp terminal, as opposed to a strip and fold. If you strip the wire, you fold the core underneath, and then you crimp it on it. There's two different types of terminals. You have a strip and fold, and then a core crimp. Well, if you do the core crimp, which we mostly do, the core will pull or suck into the insulet if you do the insulet first, the big crimp. So imagine you do the other way. You crimp on the core first, and then you do your thick insulet. Well, it's putting undue stress on that. Your conductive core. Here's a good way to imagine it. Our conductive core is 3.5 feet of copper nickel spiraling. I'll say it, doesn't matter. And it's a real fine thread. It's the same as a boat going 3,500 RPM on a rough lake. You're only going to be able to go so fast. Same RPM on a smooth lake, you're going to go a lot quicker. Well, if your core, next time you guys do this, look at different wires and strip it off and actually look at the core. Some of the manufacturers' cores are really rough. Well, the same thing on with a conduction of electricity, you're going to have hot spots. Each one of those mounds going up and down is creating heat, creating resistance.
And you're talking about surface area too. Surface
area, exactly right. Now our core is like 3 times thicker than most of the other cores out there. So that's a big difference too. You take say a fire truck, you're pumping through a garden hose. You're hardly going to get any water out. You go through a thicker hose, a fire hose, you're going to get a lot more water. It's the same thing with the ignition wires. Same identical thing. Then you go through Ohm's law and all that good stuff, and it's beautiful.
There's one of your competitors, I'm not going to say the name, but they have a very, very well-written article on what makes a good spark plug wire.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's a good American company. I know, a lot of guys use them, and they have good luck with them. I'm not going to say anything bad about them because they have such a great customer base, and that's great to have a customer base. That's a phenomenal thing. But the first guy that invented a machine gun, I'm sure nobody believed him that it was a better product than the revolver. People have to progress with technology, and the new technology is out there. And it's like who on earth has not had a yellow Excel supercoil? Those things were great. They looked great and everything. They did the job, and until somebody came up with something smaller or lighter that sparked hotter, nobody cared to change it. That looked really cool. But technology is out there, man. Carbon fiber, like the great advances they've had with that, titanium, aluminum, just everything. Mike Janis is changing his blowers, seems like weekly, and each time is better and better. That guy he's not happy with everything is always getting better with him. And I respect teams like that do their own, what do you want to call it? Their own trial and error things. They had a blower hat that's perfect, but then they changed it and made it better. How does it get better? Well, he's amazing. It's an amazing team. They are an amazing, and just like a ton of teams out there, to support the trial and error, and it's expensive. You were saying before, I think it was maybe John saying, trial and error. We've done stuff. What's the best way to do it? And you listen to your friends who have done it. It saves you money.
So it wasn't a super laboratory intensive approach.
It was not. It was a trial and error. The first wires we were doing were 8mm, and they were noisy. But I'm a Mopar guy, and I took them to our Mopar shows.
And Mopar guys love making noise. Sorry.
It was we just spin a tire. We're good racers, but our happy maybe medium is 500 horse or 700 horse or 800 horse. We're not doing that. The other stuff that with the data acquisition, it was good enough. Just like NASCAR. In NASCAR, there's not a lot of electronics, believe it or not, on NASCAR. They're still using 6 AL boxes, aren't they?
No, they finally switched over to coil packs a couple years ago. Or McLaren.
God bless them, Monty Smith. I introduced them to the coil packs. Mark Mickey.
Really? You got Monty into that? That's cool.
Chad Henderson. Chad Henderson's car was a test bed for those smart coils.
I met Monty at a drag. He's just stopped in at Drag Week, one of the events for the day, and came over to say hi to Larry and knew some of the other guys, and they introduced me to him. And so I talked to him. For some reason, they were doing something. I ended up they were pulling the trans out. We bent a converter or something. I just stood there talking to Monty for probably 2 hours. Coolest dude ever. And I'm just like, you're a nitrous guy and you're into coil packs and a dry shot? I'm like, holy shit. But at the time, he was having such luck with these Pro Mod guys. And it was funny because Monty was the guy that you'd meet the guy, you wouldn't think he was the leading edge adopting that technology first. Because up until that point, a lot of us were coil packs 5 years before that, the turbo guys and they're, nitrous guys. Oh, that's junk. Don't do that. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, if you get it right, they're amazing. But that's
exactly right.
Cool side story about Monty.
Yeah. Mark and Ryan Mickey were the first ones to put them on their Pro Street Camaro.
Right.
During the ADRL for the ADRL, or no, NMCA. I'm sorry, NMCA. And they won that. And that was the first PRI show I ever went to down in Orlando. So they said, Rick, man, this thing blows a spark in they would blow spark holes in paper. And he said, Rick, this thing's amazing. So then I told Monty about it, and I got Holly involved with it. And then next thing you know, they're on Pro Stock cars, and that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Now it looks like Pro Stock might be leading to anything now, huh?
Well, so what are they going to let them run on the mountain motors? I still work with a couple of guys in NHRA Pro Stock, and I really need to call and find out what's going on. I haven't talked in a few days, but I just saw the stuff here last week.
Whatever it is, it sounds expensive.
Dude, nothing cheap about. I'll tell you about electrical noise. I saw 3 attempted pulls destroy. I just estimate $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of stuff because of noise issues. On which, so I mean, it's depressing what you can kill, how much money you can burn through when having problems, Yeah.
But I mean, how quick do you think you can go without all the electronics? I mean, what are you limited to? Are you able to,
do I think the electronics are speeding them up? No. I
mean, a simple magneto, right?
Yeah.
They've been doing it for years and years and years.
Yep. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, you put the electronic ignition and EFI on there, it's definitely going to go faster. Nah, and it didn't, I don't know. My curiosity was Pro Stock.
Rewind and say that one more time.
Another layer of control.
So Dahlquist is the guy that did the carb versus EFI shootout, and it was pretty funny because it was right there with, indistinguishable difference between my best efforts on EFI and a BLP take 5 minutes to install it, carb out of, the Laws guys, Mike and Bo, are super awesome carburetors, don't get me wrong. But yeah, a 15-minute install made that missing half a horsepower not that big of a deal, you know.
Jeez, oh man.
But I mean, we've been part of some pretty tight tests, and if you're, you know, the Engine Masters, we did have more luck throwing more ignition at certain things. Tony Bischoff did some testing. Brad Nagel, who's not on here tonight, but he's was working for Tony at the time, and they tested hotter and hotter ignitions with ice ignition and would get repeatable.
And he won.
Yeah,
that
they
was
won.
That was where Tony won. He was amazing. He was the first time anybody heard of that Australian company, Ice.
Yeah.
That was amazing stuff.
Michael and those guys are really cool. But anyway, it's so. Yeah, I mean, you see little improvements, but max effort stuff, it's like, oh my God, we're able to repeat a half a horsepower extra average. Well, that's 20 points or whatever in Engine Masters. Yep. So that was a big deal. But
that's very cool.
Yeah, so good spark is a good thing. So what else? Anybody else got questions for him before we send this poor guy off who's been hanging with us? You know, it's funny when I'm watching the Facebook chat go by and it's just one after the other. I got Firecore wires. They're awesome. I got Firecore wires. They work great. And they got here in 2 days.
To say, I cannot even find the chat.
I got a guy in Australia, Dale Heiler, Firecore #1, best wires I've ever used. I mean, this is crazy. Yeah.
Where is this chat? I can't.
It's on that Facebook video. If you go, and you'll be able to go back and play through the comments, so you can go back and play it after we're done here.
Alex Lond is wondering if you make plug wires for diesel applications.
You're gonna laugh. I've got a Cummins diesel pulling truck that's got a mag and it's gasoline.
Yeah, is it gasoline or is it methanol? Is it gas?
I think it's
methanol. Yeah.
Is it methanol?
I got a couple customers there that do methanol converted DT466s and Cummins for pulling.
He's in Ohio. He's not that far. I sponsored him. I said I can tell my friends that I've got wires on a Cummins. It's awesome.
That's hilarious. What else we got here?
Very cool, guys. Very, very cool.
What was wrong?
Well, thanks for the opportunity, man. This is absolutely amazing.
It's a cool chat. We're going to have you back for sure. This is going to be one of our top episodes, so I can tell right now. You and Lake Speed so far are going to be neck and neck. Jeff from Aeromotive has got a couple of good ones that have gotten a lot of downloads, but we're trying to up our game as far as quantity, and we really appreciate you, number one, answering the message, you know. And I mean, we had talked about you, but as you can see, for a lot of our listeners already run your stuff. In fact, a ton of them do, and all the fast ones. So it was kind of a natural thing, man. I'm just going to message this guy, and I had actually mentioned you in the podcast the other time. I was like, I want to try and get this guy on here. I really appreciate you responding and taking the time. You know, we're not the smallest of podcasts, but very niche and specific. But
very cool. You know, that's a great thing about this. You know, I send pictures. I've got pictures on my phone where guys say, "Hey, man, I got a C7, but I'm putting this on, and I got to do this." And hey, guess what? I've got pictures on my phone. Here's a whole bunch of boots. Which one works? Hey, are you able to send them to me? Oh yeah, I'll put them in the mail today, and I'll send you samples. And you see, nobody really does it out there, you know, and it does it easily anyway, like this. You know, I got Norwalk Raceway is a half hour from me. I've got the airport 45 minutes from me. I've driven wires to both of them just for guys
to get them a seat on the plane.
Continue racing, you know.
Yeah.
So
your buddy Frito says hello, Rick Lakin. He asks how many of your wires are on Hemi Challenge cars? That's a good question.
I know we won the U.S. Nationals with a Morrison car.
Nice.
Engines Inc.
Yeah. No, I saw lots of them doing Hemi Challenge. People don't realize how much money people spend on those cars and engine combos. A lot of development there.
Yeah, well, how about a Hemi Challenge guy just switched over to go to Pro Stock Racing?
Oh, oh my God, I'm forgetting his name. Forgetting his name.
They have the Jesselt 68 Cudas.
Why am I forgetting his name? Oh my God! I can't.
Yeah, but he's not the best. So you figure that's the next step to progress. He's won almost everything at the time for the Hemi Challenges, so he threw his hat in the ring for Pro Stock. And you know, it's like you said, it's a learning curve and it's expensive. But if you want to challenge yourself, there's engine masters. We're throwing.
Charlie
We've got
Westcott.
some stuff.
Charlie Westcott.
Exactly
God, how did I
right.
forget his name? That guy's super
Tom.
popular too.
Tom Vigu for the win.
Thank you, Tom. God, we were looking like idiots. I can't believe I forgot Charlie's name. We pitted next to him a bunch of times last year too. Well, the times that he was able to get out there. I mean, they're actually not a big budget for pro stock as a whole different
Lloyd
world.
Wolford, that's who it is.
Oh.
It's Lloyd. He won the. Yeah, well, funny thing is, one of these pro stock guys put him on his Copo, changing absolutely. And this is, I'll look you right in the eye.
Yep.
He said, Rick, I changed absolutely nothing on my Copo.
Yep.
And we gained 9 horsepower.
Yep.
And 19 foot-pounds of torque.
Yes. So to me, that means there was something they were missing, that they were getting the occasional misfire. And sometimes you can't hear it if it's not a consistent dead hole. That was enough to kill their average power a little bit. It's
incredible.
Yeah, I looked at the pro. I learned after working on pro stock, I learned to look at it as, okay, I knew that we had 2,700 combustion opportunities to propel that car down the track. And it's got to the point where that's what they think about each cycle, and in some cars we had issues where each cycle, one cycle would be too rich, one would be too lean. It would misfire this one and we were missing pulses. And you really want to get as perfect of a mix and as perfectly accurate of timing as you can possibly get, and consistent on each cycle. And I've started thinking about engines that way now as combustion opportunity. It's funny you say that, because that's how those guys look at it.
There's always an event.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is it's nothing's magic out there. Everything is an upgrade. If it's an upgrade, if you're upgrading to twin, Dominator over an 850, you're going to pick up stuff, and you have to adjust. You just can't bolt on a single plane manifold with a Dominator and expect the stock engine is going to work. It's a whole system, and that system has to work properly and be set with each part in that system. So there's no magic in anything. You just can't
test over and over.
Test. And like I said, you can have an atomic bomb.
Yeah.
An atomic bomb in a cylinder.
And validate your tests. Yeah.
You're not going to gain 1 horsepower, but
Right.
you start adding fuel and air, and it still burn that. You still have and then you open up the spark plug gap. That's what a lot of guys are doing. They're blowing that spark out. Then they're switching to the different coils and the different systems. And then they get a bigger spark, and then they get a bigger gap, and you got to add more fuel. And
Yep.
You guys have a very interesting job, man. You must sleep. You can't sleep at night just thinking of stuff.
I didn't sleep this last night. We're getting Bonneville cars ready, and I think about noise and stuff like that, and just different things. And we rewired a whole car recently, but we've learned some ways to wire cars to make it less of an issue with spark plug wires sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's
a guy, and tell me this, you guys would know this. We had a guy with noise on his with noise on his car, and his boost controller was acting weird. So we made the same exact wire set, but an inch longer, and it cleared everything up.
It probably had problems with something to do with the PWM drivers that drive the solenoids, because those are frequency based. They'll run a fixed frequency and change their duty cycle. And I've seen that where you pass through a certain RPM range and everything twitches and freaks out for a second. And if you hang in that RPM range, then it's a real issue.
So, I mean, you're lengthening or shortening the antenna, and that'll adjust the EMI or RF?
Right. That's the idea. Yep. It moves the operational frequency out of a range that's bothering whatever it's bothering in your application. So
now we've had guys with we've got a 250 ohm wire too. It's an 8mm wire, and we've got those things on twin turbo cars that had, no matter what, they had huge EMI and RF problems.
Right.
Well, we put this 8mm wire on there, everything's solved.
Very
so
nice.
that's, you just don't have to have a thick, super fat wire. Just whatever does a job and your system is happy with. That's the biggest thing.
Cool.
And
Any
to
other
be
guys
happy.
got questions? Anyone else before we let him go? We're well past our hour.
I'd like to hear a bit on. I understand why resistance is good in this stuff. I'd like to hear more about what you found in some of your testing with the different resistances of wires and where you ended up with your wires roughly as a thought. Like you've just mentioned, you have a 250 ohm wire. What's your other wire sit at? What were the things that led you to get to that point that you saw were happening that cleaned up when you changed the resistance?
Well, it's a good balance. That's a great question. Heat is a big part of it. When you have a carbon core and you got 5,500 ohms, that going back to the fire hose, if you're trying to push that water through there, you got a corona effect, and you guys have seen that. I know you've seen that. The corona, it just you can only push so much voltage and amps through a small little core. When you open up that possibility, now there's a good balance. You're not every car needs a thick core like that. So if you do a 250 ohm, but it's a consistent core, and it's still a ferrite core that's absorbing your EMI and RF. We've had cars, and I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I've seen this exact firsthand. They put on an exact date-coded set of wires on a Mopar on a 446 back car. Dynoed it, air fuels were perfect. We went to Carlisle, put my wires on, the thing wouldn't run for anything. It leaned it out so greatly that we had to put the other wires on. Then I took those wires, put on another car, and it ran perfect. It's a tune. It's a like I said, it's a system that
it's a balancing act.
It is a balance. That's a perfect thing. It's a balance. Clown on a ball.
It'll lead guys to think they solved one problem just because they really moved it out of their way. You know what I mean? It's like, nah, that's something you did might not necessarily fix it, and it might come back later under different conditions. But I run into that all the time. And that's basically where I spend 90% of my time is troubleshooting misfire stuff, for EFI.
At the end of the day, when you're driving, when you're lining up in the beams, you don't want to have to think if a wire is snapped on there. You don't want to have to think. You want consistency. You want the same routine over and over and over and over again. And I think our wires fit that bill, that you're not guessing if it's snapped on. You're not guessing that, your data acquisition is going to be fuzzy. There's of course there's circumstances all the time where no matter what, that engine's not going to be happy, or that computer's is not going to be happy. And without changing every single thing in that whole engine compartment, wires are the cheapest thing. They're back in my wires everyone's wires wear out. They wear out from the inside out and the outside in. When a mag ruins a wire, it starts, the ohms go down. It's not an ohm thing. It's not lower ohms is better, because
right.
everyone running solid core wires.
Truth. Yep.
It's a balancing act, and you have to take the ohms. Hey, that solid core is great for a Magneto on a nostalgia car. It has zero electronics, and your foot braking it, and you're great to go.
And you don't mind getting cancer. Just joked about that. They parked the big MSD 8 or 7 AL box on Larson's truck originally right underneath the passenger seat, where Chad had to ride for like 40 hours. I'm just like, dude, you're going to get ass cancer from that. But,
oh, man.
Anyway.
Larry's great.
Yeah, it's fun to work with. So
okay, go ahead.
Nope, that's all I got, man. We gotta let you go.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
And sorry, I'm joining a bit late. I had to get off there. But what do you say is the useful life of the wires? I have sets on 2 cars, I'm proud to say, but they've been on there for a little while now. So how do I know when it's time to replace?
When you guys, an easy way to do it is you bench test it. But bench testing, you only put 1 volt through a wire. You're checking conductivity through a bench. What it really works is you want to be able to put amps through it and measure, through
how much current it can tolerate.
It's called a CISPR test. Yeah, there's all kind of different tests that you can do, but you want to get the current consistently. Basically, you put your leads on there. You put your multimeter or your Simpson or whatever you want to use to either infinity or if your wires are 50 ohms a foot, you put it to the 200 range,
right?
Or 500 range, and
so you can look at
around.
Resistance as the homebrew guy's way of getting some indicator of how the wires are doing.
The big thing that breaks down on nitrous cars, you're pulling the wires on and off, so you're opening up that contact point with the spark plugs down. If it's a 90-degree terminal, that has to come straight on and straight off. If you put it off at an angle, you're opening up the crimp on your core. So you'll get arcage inside there, start melting your boot. Then it'll go to a header primary, and then you got
that's when it shoots and cuts a hole through the rubber and then gets on it and goes straight to the header primary. I've seen that.
We've seen it. I've seen it on a Bonneville car where the guy had his coil wire zip tied to his downpipe, to his down tube.
Yeah.
and that thing was a freaking light show. He said he couldn't believe it. I said, well, on Corey McClementon's car, no, on another car, he used to drive after Corey Mack. They had a video showing the coil wire had a corona effect. It was glowing, and that was a world record. It was a record pass. So corona effect's not, it's not taking away performance. Just saying, hey, that I can't handle anymore. Hey, speaking of, I just want to say real quick, I think there's two guys out there that don't sleep at all, and that's Chad and Wes. Chad, I don't know how he ever goes to bed. That guy's got so much stuff. Last week's podcast, or 2 weeks, was amazing to have him on there. He's such a great guy.
Bank Shift Chad is my buddy, man.
He's
tight friends with Chad.
Amazing.
He's usually on here, but it's busy season for him. They've been live streaming events. I think he's between events this week. But yeah, we have Chad on here pretty often.
He's a great person too.
Yeah,
and he's
Wes Buck is another one too, man. I got my bucket list when I did NHRA Pro Mod. I got interviewed by Wes Buck. And that was my straight up. I got to do the selfie interview with Wes Buck.
You jumped the shark, man. You might as well retire.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's a little. I mean, he's like, "What?" I'm like, "No, dude. That's just, to me, that's really cool because I've been watching your interviews, and it's really cool because Wes is still the little guy. I don't care what anybody says. He's still like the one man band. He does an amazing quantity of work, and I know he's got people working with him, whatever. But he goes out and does the interviews and just can walk right up to somebody and just get the details out of him. It's just a good interview. Homespun, cool dude. Midwest. He's not too far from me. He's a couple hours away from me. But yeah, that was another bucket list item of mine. And I thought Wes was really cool. And I worked with a pro stock team whose family are friends of his, and we got to hang out and stuff. And it was cool. Yeah, Wes and Chad are super cool guys. I'd like to get Wes on here sometime. Actually, that's a good idea.
He'd be in my. He would. That would be great. Yeah, a guy in your chat room asked, how do you determine what proper size and length of a wire is for your application?
Eric Anderson, which, by the way, Eric Anderson is a multi-time SCCA Solo Nationals winner. Just go ahead, carry on.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these guys, the NASCAR guys, have a 7mm wire because it's just weight. As long as that core is doing its job and they have plenty of airflow inside there, it's not breaking down the silicone. A lot of wires out there, they put a low grade silicone. It's called EPDM. It's a high clay content in the wire. Ours is still 100% silicone.
Is that the stuff that crumbles apart? I've seen that.
It's the white stuff that just falls apart. Yeah, you can just peel it off of here. So the proper size and length of your wire, you don't want it flopping around in your engine compartment. It's got function, but it's got to look good too. When you hit the brakes, you don't want it. Like I said, that fan, that was the funniest thing when that guy put it neutral and revved it up. The fan was blowing the wires into the header, the primaries.
Huh.
So,
yeah, you got to think about all that stuff. Yeah.
You can go big, but you can't, you can move down, but you can't go up sometimes.
Who else?
Hey, Scott, I've got a couple more questions, but I don't know, are we limited on time?
We're not limited on time, but he sounds like he's doing fine. So go ahead.
If I ask something that's already been asked, then, so there's, I asked the question about when to replace, and so we got an answer there. I've had a situation with a couple of cracked porcelains, which drove me nuts. They were minor cracks. So, and you could eventually see when I pulled them off how the plug was arcing across that porcelain. It took about 6,000 RPM to find it, but that's what was going on. So my question is, once that happens, do I need to replace the boots? I have the quote Pro Mod boots.
Well, it depends if you have the room there. Those Pro Mod boots won't fit inside a Brodix head. What type of engine is it?
This is 2 big block Fords. I've got the wires on it with those already. So, I know they fit. I just didn't know if I need to be replacing boots when I have a problem like that.
No, we're a big fan of the DEI titanium, the DEI titanium boots. We put them on upside down. So you slide the boot up the wire, put dielectric grease is extremely important on spark plug boots. Extremely important. You got to put dielectric grease on these things.
Lance Ness told me the same thing. Yeah.
You snap the terminal on, and then you slide the boot right back over. Some of those DEI boots do fit over those Pro Mod boots, but you just want to make sure you have some airflow in there. And I see Scott Kopel just checked in. He's one of the reasons why we came up with this 8.5 wire for his Legeary Monster, as I mentioned. Thanks for tuning in, Scott.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That is good to see him here.
Cool. So with my Brodix BB3 heads, I can't do the Pro Mod boot.
No, we got a guy, Dave Heinzman has a Brodix head, and what he does, a lot of guys do is the Pro Mod, it's got like a lip down at the bottom where it extends a little bit.
Yeah.
They just take a X-Acto knife and cut it down. The benefits of having that boot is way outweighs the trimming of that boot. As long as you don't mess up the integrity of that bottom of the boot where it's not going to spark scatter. As long as it stays consistent, that tube thickness, that spark is not going to transmit through that silicone to the head. But you put a little nick in there a little bit too deep, and that spark's not going to want to go in that cylinder. It'll find a way.
Yeah, they'll find a way out, man. They'll definitely find a way out. I tell
people. You guys
that.
ever tune Brad's Hemis, big Hemis like that? With big boost?
Yeah, I mean, so I did some stuff for PLR. I've done their I think those are BAE Hemis that they run there. I've tuned some of those on their engine dyno and a couple in cars.
I've got, man, he's since retired racing, but this guy came up with this idea for spark, they're blowing these spark plugs. That spark is going not in the cylinder. Yeah. He's killing the spark plugs. It's going from the tip of the spark plug to the hex head.
Yes.
So the Hemi tube, the Hemi boot goes over that spark plug, right? And there's a little gap of porcelain that you see between the bottom of that Hemi boot and the hex head.
Yep. Oh, well, yeah. You got to try to touch the steel.
No.
Even
better. You put a little piece of silicone, you take an old spark plug boot and you cut it and you make a little donut and you fill that space up. It's got to remain small enough so your socket can still go over your spark plug.
Yeah, yeah.
But as long as you make little bit more resistance in there, that's all it takes.
That's cool. No, we ran into that same thing. Lance Nist at Pantera, he also had a pressure test chamber, and he showed me the same thing. He's like, you want boots or something to completely cover that gap, because if there is exposed porcelain between the end of the boot and where the plug steel and the hex is, you literally can get, and you'll see carbon tracks on that along the porcelain. The spark will ride its way out there.
Lance is the master of electronics.
Do you know Lance? That's cool.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of guys don't know Lance at all. He lives out there actually Bill moved now. Bill used to live right down the street from him. But Lance has got the super cool collection too. His place is like a museum. I got to get out there.
Same with John at AEM. Do you guys ever know?
Oh, yeah. A lot of AEM users here. Yeah. I don't know him, but I have been to their Hawthorne facility for classes before.
Cancioli he's so funny. And I flew him, or he was coming out to PRI anyway. And there was a fundraiser for Schumacher for Riley's kids.
Yeah.
It's a big bowling thing where we had a team, and John Cancioli was there, and he's so funny, but man, he knows that is a group of guys that work there that are car enthusiasts. They're not just millionaires that are throwing out a name and investing and hey, we're a high performance thing and
bunch of legit car people. Yeah,
they are true car enthusiasts, and I think pretty much that's one of the requisites that they got to be to work there. Is their AEM is a very cool company, very very cool company.
Cool. All right,
you guys know Spark. You guys work with the Bonneville guys.
I do. Yeah, that's funny you say that. If you follow me on Facebook, my last 24 hours was a complete thrash on a Bonneville car on a modified roadster, blown gas modified roadster, that Andy Leach's car, the Cal Automotive guys. It's a pretty wicked car. It's on Facebook, and we were getting all the data logging going. One of our guys, Brad Nagel, wired this car up completely. And I mean, this thing is nuts as far as like having to manage noise. It has, let me give you an idea of all the inputs and some of the inputs on this thing. He's got engine coolant temp, but also engine coolant outlet temp. Interesting stuff you never really watch. Intercooler water inlet and outlet temps, intercooler air inlet and outlet temps, intercooler inlet pressure so that we can see the efficiency of the intercooler. We also got, outlet pressure is the same as manifold pressure. What else do you got? Shock travel at all corners, like a Pro Mod would have. God, there's a whole bunch more that's all the fluids have temperatures and pressures.
Downforce sensors?
Sorry,
they have downforce sensors.
So his downforce sensor is going to be the shock travel is what that's going to be. He's got that, and so Yeah, it's there's like 30 or 40 some inputs on this thing. It's ridiculous, but
We've got
anyway,
a
That's the
great
car that
customer
looks
base.
like
the Ace and
that's the
Gary
car
car.
that looks like the one that looks like Peter Griffin's car.
Right. Right. That's what people
You guys
say.
ever hear of Spark Plug Gary, White Goose Bar Racing?
Yes. We know Spark Plug Gary from. So those guys are the ones. The White Goose guys are pretty funny. Dan Warner is a buddy of mine. He's one of the White Goose guys, and John from AEM, isn't he part of that group?
Yes, he is. Yeah,
Yeah.
John Cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have the smart coils on there, but yeah, they're big. They were giving me updates every minute. What's going on now?
How
Their
we know them
wires
is
are-
they have a wet bar in their trailer. That's
They've
how you
got
know those guys.
They've got 6 cars, and we've got our wires on there, each one of their cars.
Nice.
They absolutely love it. They're just great guys.
And they know because they've been doing it combined. There's like 400 years of experience in that group there. And Dan Warner is the chief tech guy that you got to really get inspected by. If you set a record, or if you qualify for a record and go to impound, you get to hang with Dan Warner. And you know, if you've got your shit together, he's a guy that you're going to love, and he works with you. If you don't have your shit together, you're not going to like Dan too much. But
Hey, are you guys going to be at the Engine Masters this year? It's going to be in at Wiseco.
I'm
in
not. I'm
Ohio.
not doing a team this year. You know who is Chris Henderson though. He's a buddy of ours. He's a buddy of the
Right,
show.
Yeah, him and Scott Koppel, they're going to be teaming up, and we got some parts on there too.
We've helped with their EFI last year. I helped a little bit. Just got him pointed in the right direction. But Chris knows what's going on.
That's a smart guy.
Yep, he is. It doesn't look like it, but
You
he's
don't
funny.
let him fool you.
Yeah, right? He's a boat guy. He's always got cool pictures of boats that they're something really fucked up, like an engine block split in two. And by boats, I mean like 100-foot long steel trawler things. But anyway.
That's incredible.
Oh, he's got some
Yeah.
neat stories. But all right. So, Bill, did you get your question satisfied, or are you just being patient over there?
I'm being patient.
Go ahead.
I have one more, but it's a slightly broad, and you may have covered this already.
Did we
One-
fix the Pro Mod boot though? Did we answer that?
Yeah. We actually that whole discussion got exactly where I wanted to be.
Good.
Since
Good.
it was your birthday yesterday, Bill will
Happy
let you ask one more
birthday.
question.
Thank you.
We
Rob.
accomplished
Yes,
one thing
sir.
tonight. That's great.
Dude, at Bill's age, he doesn't really want to be wished happy birthday. Just throwing that out there. All right, carry
No,
on.
I don't mind. I'm still happy to be here. You know what I always say,
Happy
it's better-
Survivor's Day.
Yeah. It's better to be seen than viewed, my friend. It's better to be seen than viewed. So anyway, no. So speaking of Lance, I run IGN ones on everything, and I was always curious about whether that dictated a slightly change in wire strategy. And then secondly, I'm driven nuts by all the cars I see where they feel compelled to put the coils on the valve covers and make that big mess. And it's like, well, how are you going to run the valves? And I run NA stuff, so you got to run the valves all the time.
I was going to say,
And I'm
turbo
always
guys,
driven-
you run the valves
Yeah.
when the valves make an appearance.
Yeah, I know in the turbine. Yeah. So, but anyway, I'm just sort of curious. Does it make any difference where the damn coils are? Because I think a lot of people could have a lot better lives if they didn't feel compelled to stick the stupid things on the valve covers.
Well, a lot of it's dictated by the headers. You know, those evil guys building the headers kind of dictate where those coil packs are made. A lot of guys are seeing, depending on the engine, are mounted on the frame rails underneath the exhaust, so it just goes right down underneath the spark plugs, and it makes it super simple to work on. You put it on your Pro Jacks, you put it up, you go underneath, you pull them off, and there's a lot less heat. Believe it or not, there's a lot less heat down there by the oil pan than there is above the primaries. So as long as they're mounted nicely, a lot of guys are mounting them inside the firewall. They're passing it through. I'm not a big fan of that. It's great that you're getting it out of the engine compartment, but if you have data acquisition in your race
Bringing
packs
that into
over
the
there,
house is not a good thing either.
no, not at all either. So
Yeah.
that's like big block Chevy guys with the race pack putting the coil right next to the race pack. It's like,
Right.
put it underneath the brake,
Yeah.
put the master cylinder or
Anywhere
something.
else.
Not that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, your guys are getting inventive on the mod motors. The 4654 mods. Guys are mounting those things on the valve covers as well. But if you're going to run the valves, you just take the whole valve cover off and they stay on there.
Right. Just undo the wires.
That's
The problem
exactly what I'm doing. And
Yeah,
you got to pull them off the plug anyways because you're going to check the plugs and see what it's doing every pass anyways. And
so it's better just
Yeah.
to disconnect
Just
the
one
upstream
together.
side of the harness, which doesn't.
Yeah.
See,
It's one
aesthetically,
connector that has to disconnect.
aesthetically, you don't want a whole lot of wire there because you just leave it on the plug because that tube is 6 inches long, So you got to
Yeah.
pull it out of the valve cover. So you're going to have 7 inches of travel on your spark plug wire if you're going to leave it on the coil pack. So you take it off the coil pack and just, you're kind of limited by the header, guys. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Still keep them cool.
So
if you
Scott, I
can.
should continue to mount them right on the same board where I have the ECU. That was a joke.
Just make sure they all share the same ground.
No, just do it that way, Bill, but just have me come out again. I enjoy my going out wherever Bill lives vacations, although now you're not right on the beach. So
No, he is
Do
on
people
the
buy you
beach.
dinner when
All
you
the
go
beach.
tune their car?
say that again, Rick.
When people fly you out to go tune their car, do they buy you dinner or usually pack a lunch?
They better be buying dinner. But I'm pretty easy to please.
Do you pay the 30% that you got to pay when you go to a track?
To the Ducks race? No, you know what I did that last one when he started announcing that anyway? It was funny. Ironically, I didn't go to the event, but I had like 6 cars I was taking care of during the event remotely. I'm doing it sitting here via Wi-Fi, right?
Good.
Via TeamViewer. And I'm like, I got your 30% right here.
They're great, man.
They're funny. I love going to a
Ducks.
Ducks race. That's one of our favorite events here on this podcast. It's a bucket list thing. We tell people you got to do it.
I met so many people there. Brad, how about Brad Edwards?
Yeah.
I just met so many great racers. Jesse Lambert, oh my gosh, there's so many great guys that, you figure like bigger the boat, bigger the jerk, they sometimes they say,
Not
But-
in drag racing.
No.
No.
The more, you like Team 68 from Canada, these guys, Woody. How about Woody?
See, I know Woody. So Woody's from St.
Woody-
Louis.
Oh,
Yeah,
Woody
and
puts out
Woody taught me how Magneto comes apart and how it works. So that's my story about Woody is that he
his
came in one
trailer
Sunday
is
morning.
built for parties.
Yeah, it's got tunes. It's got subs on the side of it. Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, but
know,
Woody came in on a Sunday morning at an NMRA race once, like an hour early to meet up with me. He's like, dude, we're going to disassemble one of these Magnetos. And just so you understand, because
That's cool.
I was working on a car. It was Keith Berry's car, and I had questions about the phasing. I didn't believe the phasing that we had it phased right, and we didn't. And so, and I'm like, I don't know how these things come apart, though. I don't want to fuck this up. Woody's like, dude, I'll just meet me here tomorrow at like 8 in the morning or 7. I think it was 7 in the morning. Really? Okay, cool. We came in there and we disassembled it in Keith's trailer and totally understood how you got to have the mag. There's 2 parts of phasing to a mag. There's basically the point where the energy is the strongest, and then you have to phase that whole thing so that, say, you want to be at 20 degrees of spark when you're in your biggest boost, then you phase it so that that the gap in the rotor and the tower is close as possible, and that underneath that it's right at its peak charge point and ready for discharge. You can't move that stuff around and just sit there and turn a mag. You know what I mean? And even if you're using a points box to control it, retard timing a little bit or whatever, you got to make it so that when you need the peak spark energy, everything is phased and lined up. Oh, it was super cool. That's my Woody story. Mark Woodruff is who we're talking about. He's a down to earth guy, and then goes off and does his program, and his super badass program, super fast, very competitive.
When are you guys coming to Cleveland for a class?
It's gonna be. I'm setting those dates up like this next week. I was trying to set them up this week, but I got stuff going on with the Bonneville.
Where are you going to hold it at?
Don't know yet. I'm gonna bug you for that, and we're gonna do one up there, in northern Ohio, or farther north. We've done them in Columbus before, but I want to do one up there by Henderson.
I might be talked into coming.
Well, it would be up by Chris Henderson too, and we could do one with
Yeah.
him. And I mean, we might do one on an engine dyno or something with his, something like that. I don't know, but we'll figure it out this fall.
That'd be all right.
When it cools off. Yep. So I try to do it when things cool off. I'm in Minneapolis this weekend, and then a couple weeks off. Then we're down in Fort Worth in October. But I'm sorry. Yeah, October. But we have a nice air conditioned training facility in Fort Worth. Cool, man. We should get going, guys. I got stuff to do.
How long's your longest show been?
A little over 2 hours.
We got 45 minutes to go.
No, we did.
Just
Are you
kidding,
headed off to Bonneville, Scott, or are you staying remote?
I'm staying remote. I'm gonna be otherwise detained until.
I thought we were setting the record tonight for longest show. Come on.
Well, we switched to a 1 hour format recently to make it easier on our guys. So our first 55 shows were 2 hours long. Or 53 shows were 2 hours long. And it's rough on the guys. I mean, God, I'm killing these guys. Let's just make it an hour. So we shoot for an hour or minimum of an hour. But if it's good and entertaining like this one, then we go longer. So here we are. But you probably got to get up for work in the morning. So
It hasn't ever been rough on me.
not on you. the rest of it. Now I got to spend an hour putting this whole thing together and get it uploaded to podcast sites because everybody in Australia is bitching because it's lunchtime and they want to listen to the podcast.
I really hope that's somebody filling up a glass of water in the background.
Somebody took their
Not
phone to
me.
the urinal.
Not me.
I would never do that.
Nobody's owning it.
I would never do that.
Yeah, it was Bill.
But I am here. I am here in Columbus. Yay!
Oh, cool. In Columbus, Ohio?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. You're on the other side of the country. That's kind of cool.
I know. So
You can come up to make sure you come up for the show. I definitely want to meet you guys, man.
Oh, we will. We'll come look you up for sure. I will look you up. Don't worry. All right. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Rick, stay on the phone for a couple minutes and chat with the guys here. Let me do the outro music. We'll let that play. We'll wind it down. It takes about 30 seconds. And then,
Guys, thanks for the opportunity, man. I have to say I'm sorry to some people because I just can't. They call and leave messages, and it gets, and they text, and sometimes I lose texts, and I really got to apologize to the people that I've. Somebody, I think Scott said he was trying to get a hold of me. Or Mark did. Mark, I'm really sorry, Mark, and please give me the opportunity to earn your business. I value your business.
You don't need Mark's business, dude. It's all right.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
well, no, he said he tried to get a hold of me, and I
It's true.
No,
I just want to apologize.
No, good. Yeah, it happens, man. When you're a one-man band in this industry, it's hard to, sometimes things drop through the cracks. Keep trying and understand that we're working hard.
That's right.
Cool.
I'll stay on the
Stay on the line, brother. We'll talk to you in about 30 seconds.
Thanks.
All right. So let's see, man. Everybody else, that's pretty much covers it. I guess we'll just play the outro. And thanks all you guys for listening. Thanks, Rick Gorski, for being on tonight. That was super cool. Him and Lake Speed, man. These are two of probably the best podcasts we've had so far. Hope you guys like it. Let's see. Class this weekend in Minneapolis. Check it out at RealTuners.com if you're interested in taking up one of the last couple seats. We feed you good. That's about all I got. Everybody have a good night, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday. Take care. Outro, and thanks all you guys for listening. Thanks, Rick Gorski, for being on tonight.